Picture this. You're walking through a grocery store when you spot someone approaching. Your brain immediately lights up with recognition. You know this person. Their face is as familiar as your own reflection. They wave enthusiastically, clearly delighted to see you. You wave back, matching their enthusiasm, while your brain desperately scrambles through its filing system. Who is this person? You know them well enough that they expect a conversation, but their name? Their name has vanished into the void of your memory like a sock in a washing machine. If this scenario feels painfully familiar, congratulations. You're beautifully, perfectly human. This isn't a quirk of your particular brain or a sign that you need more coffee. This is a fundamental feature of how every human brain works, and the science behind it is far more fascinating than the embarrassment it causes. What you've just experienced is one of the most common cognitive phenomena on Earth. Studies suggest that virtually everyone struggles more with names than faces, and it's not because we're not paying attention or because we don't care. It's because of how evolution sculpted our brains over millions of years. To understand why this happens, we need to take a journey into your skull, to a small region tucked away in your temporal lobe that's been quietly working miracles since you were born. This is the story of why your brain is a master at faces but stumbles over names, and what that reveals about the remarkable architecture of human cognition. Hidden in the folds of your brain, there's a region about the size of a large blueberry that has one very specific job: recognizing faces. Scientists call it the fusiform face area, or FFA, and it's one of the most specialized pieces of neural real estate in your head. Think of the FFA as evolution's answer to facial recognition software, except it's far more sophisticated than anything humans have built. This tiny region can distinguish between thousands of faces, recognizing them from different angles, in different lighting, even when they're partially obscured. It can spot the difference between identical twins and remember faces you haven't seen in decades. Here's what makes this remarkable. The FFA doesn't just see faces, it processes them holistically. While other parts of your brain might notice individual features like eyes, nose, or mouth, the FFA sees the face as a unified whole. It's reading the spatial relationships between features, the subtle asymmetries, the unique configuration that makes each face as distinct as a fingerprint. This holistic processing is so specialized that when it's damaged, a condition called prosopagnosia or face blindness, people can see perfectly well but can't recognize faces at all, not even their own family members. Remarkably, this affects about 1 in 33 people, making it more common than many realize, yet most of us never hear about it because the rest of our vision works perfectly normally. Now, let's talk about names. When you hear someone's name, it doesn't get the VIP treatment that faces receive. Names are processed like any other word, shuffled through your general language processing systems without any special recognition hardware. But here's where it gets interesting. Names aren't just any words. They're possibly the worst kind of words for your memory to handle. They're what researchers call arbitrary labels. Unlike the word baker, which conjures up images of warm bread, flour-dusted aprons, and the smell of yeast, the name baker conjures up nothing. It's a random sequence of sounds attached to a person with no inherent meaning. This brings us to one of the most elegant experiments in cognitive psychology, the Baker-Baker paradox. Researchers showed people identical photographs of unfamiliar faces. Half the participants were told the person's surname was Baker. The other half were told the person worked as a baker. Later, when asked to recall what they'd learned, people were far more likely to remember the occupation than the surname. Why? When you hear that someone is a baker, your brain creates what researchers call a web of associations. You might think of the smell of fresh bread, the early morning work schedule, flour-covered hands, or your favorite bakery. All these connections create multiple pathways to the same piece of information. But when you hear the name Baker, there's just one thin thread connecting the sound to the person, and thin threads break easily. This difference isn't accidental. It's the result of evolutionary pressures that shaped our ancestors' brains over millions of years. For early humans living in small groups, recognizing faces was literally a matter of life and death. Imagine you're a human 50,000 years ago. You need to instantly recognize who's friend or foe, who you can trust, who might share resources, who you should avoid. A split second of hesitation in recognizing an enemy could be fatal. A failure to recognize an ally could mean missing crucial cooperation for hunting or protection. But names? Names as we understand them, arbitrary labels for individuals, are a relatively recent human invention. For most of our evolutionary history, people in small tribes knew each other through relationships, roles, and reputations. You weren't John Smith. You were the one who's good with spears, or Grey Wolf's son, or the one who knows where the sweet berries grow. Your brain invested heavily in facial recognition because it was essential for survival. It didn't invest in processing arbitrary sound sequences because, for millions of years, it didn't need to. This evolutionary history explains another crucial difference: recognition versus recall. When you see a face, you're using recognition memory. You're comparing the face in front of you to faces stored in your memory, looking for a match. This is relatively easy for your brain to do. But when you're trying to remember someone's name, you're using recall memory. You're searching through your mental filing system to retrieve a specific piece of information. This is much more demanding, like trying to find one specific book in a library versus simply recognizing a book when you see it on a shelf. Recognition gives you lots of cues: the visual features, the context, the familiarity. Recall gives you much less to work with. You're essentially asking your brain to pull a specific word out of the thousands of names it has stored, often with minimal cues to guide the search. In our modern world, this ancient brain architecture creates an interesting problem. We meet far more people than our ancestors ever did, and we're expected to remember arbitrary labels for all of them. We've created a social system that our brains aren't really designed to handle. The average person can recognize about 5,000 faces, a remarkable feat of memory that reflects millions of years of evolutionary fine-tuning. But remembering 5,000 names? That's like asking a masterful portrait artist to suddenly become a telephone book. This is why many cultures developed naming systems that actually help memory. Names that described occupations, locations, physical characteristics, or family relationships gave the brain something meaningful to latch onto. Smith told you about someone's profession. Hill might indicate where they lived. Johnson told you about their father. These weren't just arbitrary sounds, they were information. What does this tell us about human cognition? First, it reveals how deeply our modern experiences are shaped by our ancient biology. The brain you're using to navigate today's world is essentially the same brain that helped your ancestors survive on the African savanna. Sometimes this creates mismatches between what our brains are good at and what our modern world demands of us. Second, it shows us something beautiful about human social evolution. Our extraordinary ability to recognize faces reflects just how social we are as a species. We evolved not just to survive, but to survive together. Every human face is a story, a relationship, a connection in the complex web of human society. The fact that we can recognize thousands of faces, remember them across decades, and distinguish between even closely related individuals is a testament to the importance of social bonds in human survival. We are, quite literally, wired to connect. Understanding this science doesn't just satisfy curiosity, it can actually help. When you know that names are harder to remember because they lack meaning, you can create meaning. Link names to images, occupations, or characteristics. Turn Jennifer into Jennifer who loves coffee, or Michael from accounting. It also helps us be more forgiving of ourselves and others. The next time someone remembers your face but forgets your name, remember, their brain is doing exactly what evolution designed it to do. They're recognizing you as a unique individual worthy of social connection. The name? That's just a filing system error in a brain that's performing millions of other cognitive miracles every second. Perhaps most remarkably, this research reveals something profound about human nature. We don't just remember faces, we read them. We detect micro-expressions that reveal emotions, we recognize family resemblances that speak to genetic relationships, we remember faces across decades as they age and change. Consider that every human face is unique among billions. Yet your brain can master this recognition task so completely that you can spot a friend in a crowded stadium or recognize a teacher you haven't seen since childhood. This isn't just memory. It's a form of social intelligence that connects us across time and space. In a world increasingly mediated by screens and digital interactions, perhaps there's something comforting about knowing that our brains are still fundamentally wired for face-to-face connection. Every forgotten name is, in a way, evidence of our deep biological commitment to recognizing each other as unique individuals. So the next time you recognize someone but can't remember their name, don't feel embarrassed. Feel amazed. Your brain just performed a computational feat that's the product of millions of years of evolution, connecting you to another human being in a way that transcends words. The name might be gone, but the recognition, the fundamental acknowledgement of another person's unique existence, that's hardwired into the very architecture of who you are. And perhaps that's the most important recognition of all.